Okay, folks, I'm going to call the meeting of the North Kingstown School Committee to order. Today is January 10th, 2017. This is a business meeting. If I could please have everyone rise and do the Pledge of Allegiance, which is to our left. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Madam Clerk, if you could please call the roll.
Mr. Blasbach?
Here.
Mrs. Hoskins?
Here.
Mr. Jones? Mrs. McGovern?
Here.
Ms. Stevens?
Here.
Mrs. Schott?
Here.
James Lawless?
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, if you could call the calendar.
On Monday, January 16th is Martin Luther King holiday, and schools and offices will be closed. Monday, January 23rd, there will be a wellness subcommittee meeting at 3:30 at the central administration offices. And Tuesday, January 24th, there's a 7 p.m. school committee business meeting.
Thank you. And next we're on presentation and recognitions. If I could ask everyone to have a brief moment of silence for Representative Kenneth Carter, who just recently passed away. Representative Carter, for those of you who may not know, served a district that included the town of North Kingstown for many years, was very active in the community, and he'll be very missed. Thank you. Our first presentation this evening is with respect to the North Kingstown High School Athletic Complex. So, Mr. Haig, if you could please proceed.
Mr. Haig is going to use this screen, correct? So we're going to have to sit in the audience.
So that we can see.
While that's coming up, I just wanted to welcome tonight. We have three gentlemen with us from PAR Corporation. We have Jim Esprinio, and I have Art Reddy and Jesse Shaw from the Birchwood Design Group. So we have contracted with them to help us in the design process for this. So some of the diagrams that you see and a lot of the information, all the cost figures have come from that study. And they'll be available for questions. So if you guys have questions, they can jump up here. All right, so I know we have some new members, so I just kind of want to bring everybody up to speed as to where we're at and what we've done for the last year. We've looked at the existing fields, some of the issues that we have out there, and I've got a diagram to kind of show you. North Kingstown High School does not have a ton of field space, so with all of the teams that we have, we overuse what we have, and there's nowhere else to put kids. We have soccer teams that go to Wilson Park, softball teams that go to Ryan Park, and our baseball team plays over at Lishio Field. And we still have, between football, field hockey, some of the soccer, a ton of use out there, lacrosse in the spring, as well as JV baseball and softball. So, the fields themselves have been overused for years. We haven't, we've tried to take care of them, and you'll see some of the pictures. The underlying areas are nice and green, but where they play most of their stuff is just beyond repair. So that's one of the big issues. The track itself was new when the school was built, but it's never been resurfaced. And we know that because the school was spelled, the name of the town was spelled wrong in the track, and it's still spelled wrong. So there was some debate as to whether it was resurfaced 7 or 8 years ago, but it's not. So the lifespan on those tracks is about 6 to 7 years for a resurface, and we're well into that at 15 years now. So one of the big issues, you'll see some cost figures as we move forward. One of the big issues, if we don't do anything now, that could triple if we have to rip up the asphalt and everything that's underneath that track. Right now, the engineers believe that the track itself is solid and that we can just lay new rubber down, rip up what's there, but use the existing base. If we don't do that, if water starts to seep in and cracks, then we're going to be looking at more than this in the future. The tennis courts themselves, one of the things that came out in the study, they believe that it was just poor compaction of the base, but 4 of the 6 courts have giant cracks, and we have some pictures coming up of what that looks like. But we've been sending our tennis team over to Jamestown for the last couple of years for certainly matches and even some practices, just because it's not safe to play out there. The cracks are too big, and you can't play on some of them. The league wouldn't allow it. The throwing events, so in track we have a number of different discus, hammer, shot put. They designed the field, it was a strange design, but they throw right onto a practice field. So the hammer, when we started the school, we only had 1 hammer thrower maybe a year. Now we have like 20. And with all, it's like Beirut, they just bomb the field with, these giant holes. And our maintenance people, they go out there, they try and fill them. The kids try and fill them. We've had the landscaping class out there. So it's not like it's ignored. It's just almost impossible to keep it up with that much use from a track perspective. And that happens in the spring. So then what happens is the grass all grows in the summer, and you can't really even see the holes. And then it's not till the fall when everything starts to die and the kids trip. So it's almost impossible to play on that field. So part of this deals with that problem. There's no irrigation out there. So there's no irrigation on the backfield. There's no irrigation on the practice field. The only irrigation we have is on the game field in the stadium. So they used to have a giant cannon that they would put out there that shot water, but I don't even think we have that anymore. And that was before my time. So those are some of the issues that we're trying to solve here with this. This is just to kind of get your bearings. So you can see where the school is down in this area here. Here is our JV baseball field. Here's Fairway Drive. So all I really want you to understand is, what we're trying to do over in this area here, which we're going to show on another slide. So I'm going to zoom into this area and talk about some of the projects that we're going to do right here. So these are the 4 tennis courts, these 2 here and these 2 right here that have the giant cracks. The track, obviously, is right here with the stadium field. There's going to be new D areas. They call them D areas because that area of the semicircle shaped like a D, very creative. And this area down here, they're going to have, that's where the track events like high jump, pole vaulting, long jump occur. We're going to move some of the long jump facilities over to this side, and we're going to talk about that in a future slide. Right now, the hammer cage sits right here, and it throws out onto this field. So part of this proposal is to shift that from throwing here to throwing this way and moving this field here, and providing irrigation and new grass, and that field would then be playable. This throwing area is a javelin, which does not injure the field at all. It makes it kind of sinks it, it almost aerates it, so that's not an issue. There's a new shot put circle over here, so if we hold a meet, we can hold those 2 events separate. Right now, the shot put sits right next to the hammer and throws out, which obviously we can't do now because the hammer would throw into that area. Other than that, we've looked at drainage. These are wetlands over here, and all this stuff is factored into the decision on where to put this stuff. One of the nice things with this layout is we don't have to adjust the parking over here, which is one of the things we had looked into, which is more costly laying new asphalt. At this time, I just want to show you guys a video, just so we kind of get our eyes on this. There's no sound to this. Our comm department shot this on Thanksgiving Day with a drone. So this is our playing field. So you can see the center of the field. That brown is dirt. So, the sidelines are great. So our staff does know how to maintain grass. Like, the grass is green, they fertilize it, they do all those things. We just can't keep up with the amount of use on the field. And keep in mind, the amount of use is about 80 games a year. It's about 50 varsity, 30 JV, give or take. So it's not like we're using these things, way past their capacity. This entire infield here is pretty much a dirt field, a lot of ruts, a lot of holes. We go out and try and fill them with sand, so on and so forth. So I'm going to continue the video. The next slide, or the next section, is where the football team practices. So it's going to be this area over here that's going to flash into play, and I'll pause it. So that's the JV baseball field right there. And down over here is the JV softball field. And this is basically the outfield of those 2 fields. This is entirely dirt. And that's where the football team plays. And there's no irrigation out there. And, when you look out there, you would swear it's like an Iowa cornfield when they're playing. The dust is flying in the air when they cut it. So with no irrigation, they can't wet it down. They can't grow grass well. And, you know, with the amount of use the football team puts on it, the grass doesn't hold up. So right now, that's pretty much pure dirt. So you get a little bit of an idea of that. And then we're going to switch from this over to the back practice field, which is where that hammer threw. And you'll see kind of an aerial shot of that. So that's your back practice field. Here's your hammer cage down in the end. It throws out. All these plotches are sand that the maintenance people are trying to repair this. But anywhere you don't see green is dirt. And these big things are big, giant holes and patches of dirt. So you can kind of see that field's in rough shape as well. And there's no irrigation on that field currently either. With that said, it's a great location for a game as far as there's good parking, there's beautiful scenery, trees, we have bleachers down there, so we have everything but the field. The last thing, it's going to be a little hard to see, it's a little dark for you, but I'm going to pause it, is the tennis court cracks. If you look, you know, just to give you a perspective, I could fit about 3 fingers inside that crack. The darker blue color that you see on the outline, if you kind of squint, that is a repair that we did just last year. So, again, our maintenance people are trying to hire people to come in and fix this stuff. We spent several $1,000s on this repair, and it held up for about 3 months because it's impossible with this size crack to fill it with the type of, you know, seam sealers that they use on small cracks. So, you know, and the gentlemen that are here with me tonight can attest. I've asked them, is there any way to repair this stuff? Is there any company that will come in? And there are companies that will come in and do it. It's very costly, and they won't warranty it because they know it's not going to last. It's the underlayment. They actually, in one of their core samples that they drill, there's a walkway that they never ripped up that goes underneath that court, which most likely is one of the things that's going to settle differently than the dirt around it. They literally laid the tennis court on top of one of the old walkways from the old school that we pulled up in satellite imagery. So that kind of gives you an idea of those existing conditions that we talked about in that first slide. And that's it for that. And we'll go back to our presentation. So here's kind of the project scope, and these issues, they have costs associated with them, and these are kind of all the different things that will solve all those issues. So we have a stadium field replacement with an artificial surface. There's several surfaces that we can talk about. The price coming in at that is $689,000 for a crumb rubber surface, which is what most people are putting in, or what most people have been putting in. The new D area is demolishing the 4 tennis courts and replacing them. They're $40,000 a piece with 4 of them at $260,000, and that would also be resurfacing the middle 2, which would need to be done as well, which is just like a basic resurface. The different track locations, refurbishing that back practice field, bringing in topsoil, seeding it, putting in irrigation. That's the cost estimate for that, $167,000. There's project management costs, contingency, site preps for the whole project. So that gives you an idea of where these costs are coming from. Where we're at in the project is we've completed 2 out of 6 phases. So the gentlemen that are here tonight have helped us with all this stuff. They've gone through, they've done all their studies, their surveys. We've come up with schematics. We've come up with a probable cost. And that's what we've come up with so far. What we have to do to move forward is these 4 things, 4 of the last 6. To give you an idea of time frame, you know, you can move these things along as fast as we can, you know, say go, but we still could get these things done by the fall if we could get this up and running, you know, in the next couple of months as from a funding perspective, or at least know where we stand from a funding perspective. One of the products that you'll see if you watch any of the football on TV, there's a lot of ads right now about a shock pad that's come out. There's several different manufacturers. But one of the things that scares people is the crumb rubber. We have mounds of evidence that say this stuff is safe, but the government's not going to come out and ever say that it's 100% safe. One of the things people are putting in is a sand-based infill. They have regular sand, they have coated sand, and then they put a G4 shock pad underneath it. Sometimes they put the shock pad even under the crumb rubber, but it's supposedly, you know, better for concussions. It's better for playing surface. You don't have to worry about the crumb rubber if you utilize the sand. It's an inert substance. So, you know, as a district, we would definitely be a leader. They just put one of these in Massachusetts, I believe, in the last 6 months. It's definitely kind of on the forefront of this, but obviously there's a cost. It's estimated at $4 per square foot, which for this project would be $350,000 on top of those other costs. So if you were trying to add that stuff up on the other page, it's about $2 million. This would add $350,000 to that. So here's some of the benefits. I know you guys are busy. I don't want to take a ton of your time. Most of these are pretty obvious. I've talked about, how, we're currently using them, and some of the things it would bring to us is from a revenue standpoint. It would allow our maintenance people to work on other things in the town. They're definitely over, taxed right now with what they have to do, maintaining the fields and everything. It really requires very little maintenance for this field. I've interviewed ADs, maintenance people from other towns, and it's pretty simplistic. It's not, you do have to have irrigation on it, but that's an automated process. The revenue from it is a big question mark. One of the things I love to make sure that this is first and foremost for the kids in the town, the adults in the town, that they can use the courts, that they can use the track, that they can use the field. But on top of that, they're not going to use it all the time. And we spend a fair amount of money out of my budget on rentals over at Wide World just for our field hockey team alone. Field hockey is one of those sports that has to be played on a smooth surface. It's really hard to play it on a bumpy surface. So they practice over there a lot. And we pay a lot of money renting over there. So I know what these fields go for because people charge me to send our teams to them. And even though they're becoming much more commonplace, there's still a lot of room for revenue rentals, particularly even in the summer when, our kind of use goes way down. One of the shining things in the school right now is our CTE program. We're bringing kids in from other districts. One of the first reasons they come here is for athletics, band, music, and stuff like that. If we don't continue to upgrade some of these things, our school isn't as desirable to come to. I mean, it's literally the front porch of a house, is our athletic field. So when they drive down the road and they see the condition of the fields, that definitely sits in their mind. This stadium, we have one of the nicest stadiums in the state, and everybody pretty much says that. We just have one of the worst fields in it. So we have great bathrooms, we have great concession stand, we have, really nice facilities. The field, I've heard people, I'll sometimes won't have NK clothes on, and I'll be standing with fans from Hendricken or whatever, and they'll say it's a shame, like this field used to be one of the shining stars. And it's not because anybody, slight of their job or anything like that. It's just, it's slated for about 60 uses a year, and we give it about 80 to 90 because we really have nowhere else to put the kids. And even at 90, the field can't handle it. So this would literally allow us to move almost everything. Everything in the spring would come inside. No one would be on those outside fields. And in the fall, we'd have to rotate around a little bit. But, we've even talked about morning practices if it goes in, so field hockey could come in the morning like hockey does. So at this time, if you guys have questions, questions for these gentlemen, I know, some of you it's new to, there's a lot to talk about. So, we could spend 4 hours, or we can just kind of let it digest and go from there. Greg, you look like you're itching for a question.
We have our new screen here, and we have to sit out here and watch it. So if any members have questions, what I'd like to do is have them ask you, and then you can just repeat it.
Excellent.
Watching later on, you can give them a question.
Sure. Yep. Yes. Going back to the first slide. This? The purple line here, I believe, is wetlands. So the question was, what is the purple line over here? And the answer was that this is the stream that comes through there, and the green is the wetlands boundary around that stream.
this item, I want to thank Mr. Haig for his presentation. Very informative. This is not an item that's up for any action tonight. It's something that people can comment on in citizens' comments if you would like. But it would definitely be on a future agenda for action. The discussions that have been had are that we would be looking at a coordinated effort involving school committee funding, town council funding, and private funding to make this happen. So in the next few meetings, I guess, we'll be talking about getting this back on the agenda to discuss how we would go about making that happen, and probably include, this would be included at an upcoming town council meeting as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, you can applaud.
Test.
Thank you for your presentation. I can see you did a lot of work. One question I had that I don't know if you've had a chance to look at or how you can look at, or there's two questions. One is the any injuries based on the field that we have currently, and probably won't have injuries going forward if this is done. And the second question is, I know Narragansett High School just redid their field. We looked into how their funding was done?
Sure. The first question on injuries. So injuries are a tough one. We don't track injuries based on where they happen as far as fields and everything else. So I don't have any data on what type of injuries we have on our current field other than the injuries that I know, that I fill out the reports for. But we don't have great data on that. We have excellent data from the college level and the high school level nationwide as far as, grass versus artificial surface. And all the data that we have seen is that comparing perfect grass surface with perfect artificial turf surface, the incident of concussions and minor related injuries goes down with artificial turf, and the one that stays the same is injuries like a ligament or strains and things like that. Those are about the same. Keep in mind, those studies were all done on perfect real grass. So the trick that we have that you're not going to find a study is what happens when you play on really crummy grass. And I don't think anybody would argue that a field that has lumps and piles and things like that are very, high risk of injury, particularly ankles and knees and things like that. The other thing is when they test G-force, which is what you would talk about concussion between real, dirt and the artificial fields, no one takes into account a frozen ground, which we play on a lot. We practice on frozen ground. When the ground's hard and the kids hit it, it's a lot different when it's, in June and they hit it. And there's no studies that really show the difference between that. So keep in mind, they're all best case scenarios, and even in those scenarios, the artificial turf is safer. So, I think we're dealing with not a worst case scenario out there, but certainly not a good one. So I think the injuries are going to be, significantly less. As far as Narragansett, we have looked at their funding. They hired a fundraising specialist, so to speak, a gentleman by the name of Dan Barry. I've met with him. We've talked about his model of how he goes about privately raising money. There was a lot of town money that went into that, and there was also a lot of foundation money that went into that. So they kind of did a similar approach where they had some money from the school system, some money from the town, and then they went out and raised some capital as well. And their project was a little bit over $3 million. I think originally it was 4.2 and came a little bit down from there. Okay. Yep. So the question is what the next steps would be, and Dr. Ajay, correct me if I'm wrong. So the school committee is going to kind of digest this information. We have some new members. They're going to look at it. They're going to look at what we're putting forward as far as costs. The goal from that would be at a future meeting, hopefully the next meeting, to have a decision made on how much the school would put in, how much we would then seek from the town, as well as then how much we would have a private component of that, kind of a three-tiered approach.
So is it an all or none basis, like you're going to do everything, or would you say, well, we only have enough money to fix the tennis courts and that's it, or?
I can't answer that. They don't let me make money decisions.
That is a very good question. In fact, one of the capital requests that we have with the town is for equivalent money for the track only. And part of that is kind of a contingency plan. My first choice would be to go about this route with a three-tiered effort toward funding, with a timeline of having a new track and field and tennis courts ready to go by September of 18. That's kind of ambitious, but I think it's doable, and so that's what we're going to pursue. If for any reason, if the funding isn't there for any part of it, we can go back to fixing what is essential. The track, for instance, seems to be an essential item. The courts seem to be an essential item, and do the best we can with a grass surface for the field still. But I think the choice for just about everybody involved that I've spoken to would seem to be to go down the road of this project. But the funding for that is not a small issue. So we have to take that up next.
For the next part of our program, it's my pleasure to introduce to you Mark DeLucia, who is the department chair here at the high school for world languages. And as part of his presentation team is Patty Kerwin, who is our English as a second language coordinator here in the district. And they have a student joining them as well.
Thank you, Dr. Humbert. Esteemed members of the school committee, Dr. Auger, Dr. Humbert, Mrs. King, first I'd like to thank you for taking the time to hear our presentation on implementing the seal of biliteracy for the 2017 NKHS graduates, starting with these graduates. As Dr. Humbert said, my name is Mark DeLucia. I'm the World Language Department Chair. Presenting with me are Mrs. Patty Kerwin, our District ELL Coordinator, and one of NK's finest, Diana Radaron, who is a senior who is helping with this as part of her senior project. I'd also like to take a moment, too, to thank our administration here at the high school, Dr. Mansiri, Dr. Morris, and Mrs. Sweet for all their support with this and helping us out so much. So what is biliteracy? We all know what the word bilingual means. Bilingual means being able to speak more than one language proficiently, speak and understand. Biliteracy takes that a step further. Biliteracy means that one is able to speak, read, write, and understand another language other than English. So what is the Rhode Island Seal of Biliteracy? So I'm not sure if all of you have been following this. This has been a national initiative for quite some time. It's been adopted in over 23 states, making Rhode Island the 24th state to adopt it. It was signed into law just this past summer, so this will be the first graduating class that we are able to issue it. It is a joint effort by a number of groups for this House bill. It will enable us to issue a seal that affirms that a student graduating from here is proficient in more than one language. So what is a graduation seal of biliteracy? Well, it is a distinction awarded by the Department of Education. It will, in addition to being a pathway towards college and career readiness, it will also be a physical label which will be affixed to the graduation diploma, as well as a notation on a student's official transcript which certifies that they are in fact proficient in a language other than English. It will be a public recognition at their graduation ceremony and a symbol demonstrating to future employers, colleges, et cetera, that that student is bicultural, bilingual, and biliterate. So here's Mrs. Kerman to talk to you about which students will be eligible for that seal.
So our world language learners, obviously, who speak English at home and come to school and choose to take up a second language. Also our ESL students who are here learning English, they've already got a second language, first language that they speak in the home. And our heritage speakers are kids who just grow up speaking two languages, never needed additional services, just have it naturally. This is a fantastic effort, and I really believe everyone wins here. It's a celebration of diversity, culture, highlights the talent and intelligence it takes to be bilingual, and it certainly fortifies the additive feature of being bicultural, biliterate, bilingual. So, and I think the most important thing is I think it helps us to accept one another as human beings. So it leads to the word I think is most important, deep connection. So if you'll allow me just to read a few lines from the Tansy Biliteracy Seal legislation, which was passed just last June. The seal would emphasize the increasing importance of learning other languages to students whose native language is English. It would also serve as an incentive for students whose first language was one other than English, not merely to maintain their first language as they learn English, but to ensure they perfect their command of it in spoken and written form so that they qualify as highly proficient. What do I do here, Mark? Thank you. So, who earns the seal? Being that we are one of the first high schools in Rhode Island to offer this seal, we modeled our criteria after Central Falls, who piloted last year. They were the first. So for English speakers, obviously they need to be doing well in their language arts class, so 3.0 average or higher. And for our ESL students, they also need to be doing well in English, but they can also qualify through access testing, which is state mandated. They take it every year in January. If they pass that test, there are their two criteria to support being biliterate in English. Our regular ed kids can use the PSAT, PARC, SAT, or any of the others in coordination with their grades. Now, for the other language, some of our kids have already qualified because they're AP and they've taken the AP exam, they're done. But our ESL kids and our other kids who are just in foreign language at the time, or world language, they are going to take the APPLE. And the APPLE is a cheap online test that they will take if they qualify they're going to have to apply first, and then we will get those tests for them. They'll take those tests, and that'll be the seal. All right, what did you do? Spacebar. All right, anticipated number of students. We expect 50 this year. So should that go down, Mark? Yeah. All right, well, it did add up to 50. Which is a great number to begin with, but we only expect this to grow in the future.
Good evening. So as they present, I'm a senior at this high school, and I'll be one of the beneficiaries of this awards. I am bilingual, French-English. I've been born and raised in France, and I moved here 2 years ago. I think that this project is a huge plus for students like I am. They'll be recognized of our talent that we have. Also, it would recognize the ESL students in our school. They came in this community from all different places, and they speak all really cool languages, like Indian, Chinese, and recognizing them and welcoming your community is something that needs to be done. So, there you go.
Thanks, Diana. I know at the November school committee meeting, many of you heard Dr. Mansouri present on the topic of personalization, as that is one of our school improvement goals. It is a goal of our district strategic plan. This aligns perfectly with both of those plans, implementing the seal of biliteracy. What it also aligns with is the Rhode Island Department of Education strategic plan, known as the Rhode 2020 vision. Specifically the section that notes globally competent graduates, that our schools will continue to produce globally competent graduates. Rhode Island aspires to become a state in which all of our high school graduates are globally competent and prepared for the global labor market. What schools and districts can do in order to support that is by supporting the expansion of world language programs and awarding the seal of biliteracy to eligible students, which is why we're here tonight. Here's our timeline. After today's meeting, we intend to get applications out, speak with students at assemblies, get applications out and review them, and then once we know precisely how many students that we have, we will order the language tests for those students who are not already in AP Spanish Literature, as they have already qualified, those 24 students. Between March and around March or April, we will administer the tests. When the results come back, we'll know to order however many seals, notify students and parents, and then they will be awarded at graduation. Are there any questions?
Can you go back to the slide in terms of the criteria?
Yes.
So just a couple questions.
Sure.
So on items like PSAT, SAT, and I assume the AP test.
Yes.
AP might be proficient as 3 and above, but for like PSAT and SAT, what are we determining proficiency is?
That's been established by the state. I believe proficiency for PSAT, proficiency in English, what was that? It was 1,500. 1,500 out of the, what scale was that? Was that the 2,400 scale? But I believe it's 1,500. I have that information actually, and I can send it to you if you like.
Because the new SAT is back. So that would include the math score?
No, we're talking strictly English proficiency. So for the PSAT, SAT, this would strictly be for students to prove English proficiency.
Okay, so it'd be the reading
Correct.
Comprehension?
So in order to prove English proficiency, they would have to attain any one of the following. They would have to have 4 years, which students need anyway to graduate, of ELA, with a grade point average of 3.0 or higher by May of the year of their graduation. Or, if they were not to get that, they could attain that through the PSAT, PARC, SAT, by proficient scores on those. Or, as Mrs. Kerwin was alluding to, her ELL students take a test known as the Axis, and they would have to have a proficient score on that to prove that they are proficient in English.
So the 3.0 GPA is on all or just ELA courses?
Just the ELA courses. So it's twofold. They need to prove proficiency in English, and they need to prove proficiency in another language. So the way that they would prove proficiency in English is either by a 3.0 GPA by May of the year of their graduation, cumulative, proficiency on the Access test for ELL students, or for other world language students, proficiency on PSAT, PARC, SAT, or any other valid test. Then they would have to prove proficiency in another language, either by the AP World Language Exam, if that's available, the International Baccalaureate, the SAT-2, or any of those other valid tests, or the APPLE, which is what we'll likely give to Portuguese, French, German, and any heritage speakers.
It's my final question. So in terms of bilingual and biliterate testing, seems to make sense. How are we sort of measuring cultural proficiency?
The AP exam actually does measure cultural proficiency, as does the Apple and some of the other exams that they would take.
Right, but I don't think the SAT does, per se.
I believe the SAT 2 does. The SAT 2 would.
Okay, so that would be foreign culture. So for English cultural proficiency, how are we measuring that?
It's just English language that they would have to be proficient in.
Right, so I guess I'm sort of getting for folks who are native speakers of another language, so really ELL students.
Yep.
I guess we're sort of assuming
That they've
just their
already been
ELA courses are
fully
going
integrated
to
into the
measure
right,
kind
correct.
of English cultural proficiency?
Correct.
Okay, because I would recommend maybe not, also incorporating as a potential other thing, if students have had an international experience or
Yes.
or more maybe a specific cultural type experiential learning might be something we would consider thinking of adding
Right.
in the future.
I believe we have the flexibility to add our own criteria as well. This criteria actually comes from the state, but I believe we do have the flexibility to add our own criteria as well. And I can speak with those who worked on this at the state level about that with the working group.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Any other questions from the members here? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up is Dr. Mansiri and Dr. Morse, who are going to be presenting the updates to the high school program of studies.
Good evening. Making sure that this is at a level that will pick up my voice. So you should have received in your preparation packet a copy of the program of studies in a PDF format. What we've done this year is, in previous years, I'm sure you're familiar with, the program of studies looked like this. It was a paper handout that we gave to students, and we were limited in this because of the cost of printing. Once you get beyond a certain number of pages, it gets very, very expensive to produce. So that kind of restricted a lot of what information we could give to students in the program of studies. And it's costly to print every year, and it's not flexible. Once you put it to print very early in the year, normally we'd be putting this to print in January for the following September. So when things came up, such as the seal of biliteracy or other things we're incorporating avenues for students, we wouldn't be able to put that in the program of studies. We used to put out addendums and newsletters and things. And now that we're going to have a live document, it's all going to be online, we have unlimited pages we can put in. We can put it in a new format that really is more attractive to the reader. I think it's a little more readable. I'm going to pull up a copy of it for you, hopefully. It looks like they closed my tab, so I will search that for you. I don't know if Mike's still here. Yep, I'm looking for my tab, Mr. Waterman. Oh, the computer restarted. All right. If you could just get the web up for me while I'm speaking, and then I can show them how that is accessed. Thank you greatly. All right. So I'm going to show you what the beta format of the program of studies looks like online. But knowing that people are quite attached to their paper formats, we didn't want to take everything away from the families, and the students like to have something to bring home and something to access. So what we did was, thank you. And I'll be able to give you, this is a prototype of what will be going to print. I wanted to give it to you first before it went to print. We're going to be handing out a small, quick reference book. You want to get that soon? That'd be great. A small, quick reference book that students can use. It has information about the timelines for registration, some important information that, to be truthful, a lot of kids and parents did not read because they'd flip right to the back of the book where the course listings were, and they wouldn't be looking at the add drop information or course registration, technical education programs. So Now it's highlighted in a separate area for them. It really stands out that information that's important for them to have. So the online version, this is what it will look like. There will be a few things that have changed. We've gotten some early feedback on, for instance, the logo. There's a new logo that was developed. It's quite attractive. It has an NK with a picture of the skipper inside the NK. It's very attractive. That was developed in our arts department with Mr. Silvera and the media. So it's a little more attractive. I think we'll be putting that in. I'd rather have student artwork on the cover. So I think in future years we're going to be having some maybe competitions with the students that they can be the cover artist and submit their work, which would be nice. The table of contents is a live table of contents. So instead of scrolling through the whole document, we've linked things. So you can, for instance, if you click on careers, it'll take you right to the careers department. We tried to make this user-friendly. You'll notice the format is a little more friendly than it used to be with accessing the information about how many credits the course is. It's also now in compliance with what Rhode wants as far as designating every course that fulfills graduation requirements. So that's in there. And there's one more little thing you'll notice, and this is still a work in progress. That little icon, and it's explained in the quick reference book, is a link to a live video that the students are producing about their courses. So the communication students have been working on this. And when I click this, it's going to go to TeacherTube right now. And that's because we're still working on some issues that I'm concerned about. For instance, if you put this on YouTube, I'm a little concerned about putting our students' faces and images up on YouTube that could be searched by anybody. And also, there's ads that pop up. So we're searching for ways to maybe embed them in a local file or put them on a restricted channel on YouTube. So we're still working on that. This is a goal in progress. But you can see that this will pop up. I'll get rid of the ad. It's very slow to load. So you can see I have to click through an ad, which is really not preferable. And up will pop a video that our students have produced about that course. And there's another little pop-up ad, so that's kind of an issue. And there are students talking about the course and the things they do in the course. So it gives a little more information to students. You might not get the flavor or really understand what's going on with a course just from the description. And so this gives the students a little more enticing information, peek into the classroom, if you would. So that's the online version. You also had a summary of the important changes, and we have some major changes that happened in the program of studies this year. For instance, the class rank and the change in how we do the unweighted GPA have changed. We are proposing that as of the class of 2020, that students are no longer ranked as far as number 1 in the class, number 2 in the class, et cetera. That's after a couple of years discussion, and every year when we have the breakfast for the top 10 students, we bring them in, we have a discussion with them, and we've asked the students over the years how they feel about being ranked. And the guidance counselors have had a lot of discussions with the students over the years about this. We've also gathered information from the industry and what other schools are doing, especially schools that are comparable to our school, East Greenwich, Barrington, Portsmouth. And recently, Mia Conti, Mrs. Torr, Mrs. Torr, I've been there so long, Mrs. Conti and Mrs. Normand went down to URI to meet with the admissions officials at URI to discuss how our student ranking can impact them and the GPA, how we were calculating them. They were extremely helpful about helping us to adjust our calculations to combat some abnormalities that we were seeing in certain strands of grades. And it has to do, if you looked at the old tables, you'd see that on the weighted, it had a strand from, say, like 96 to 99, whereas on the unweighted, it would maybe go from 94. So there were like little gaps in the strands that were causing, if you fell into certain gaps, it created some unusual things with the weighted versus the unweighted. So the system we have now corrects those errors. We're not changing anything for students who already have received a GPA or a rank. And that's why we're starting with the class of 2020, the current freshmen. We never rank students or calculate a GPA until at least after one semester. So this coming semester would have been the first time they have a calculation on their GPA. So we would like to start with a new system of calculating the GPA because we know it's more accurate and not rank the students. The other change we made has to do with the recent changes in the Rhode Island regulations. Most majorly is the math regulation. They used to require, we're working under two different systems. They used to require 4 years of math. And the reason why they did that was because of the feedback they were getting from the post-secondary institutions that kids were coming in to their colleges having to take remedial math and being rusty. So the idea was that if they didn't skip senior year math, they would be having that math experience, they would come in better prepared to take mathematics. They've recently reversed that, and in the new regulations they say 4 credits in mathematics, which was what we always required. And we did allow 1 credit to be a math, what we call related, so that if you're taking something like physics or a science that's deeply embedded in math, you didn't have to take a separate math course because you were already getting that math experience. You were being proficient in math in that way. So we've kept ours the same way and dropped the regulation from the state that you had to take that actual 4th year of math. So that means students, if they double up in math or science, they can fulfill that requirement before their senior year. And the last one, which is really exciting, is that for the first time we have courses that will be concurrent credit with the University of Rhode Island. So we are introducing a course that will be AP Computer Science Principles. This will be available to anybody who is concurrent or completing Algebra 1. It's a very, I would say, as far as computer science goes, basic course in programming. It's the first step into the world of programming. And you can actually earn 4 credits, a URI, for that course. So it's a great thing for our students. We are planning the next step, so eventually our students, before they leave this high school, we could be having 8 to 12 credits in computer science before they step foot on the campus. We're also incorporating an English course, which is the Writing to Inform course, and that will be concurrent credit in English. And it's a course that all students at URI take as a freshman, so being able to get that out of the way, so many of our students go to URI, it's going to be a huge advantage to them in their freshman year. So I'd like to entertain any questions you have about the program of studies.
Thanks, Dr. Morrison. And I'd first start by saying, it's my, I think, 4th time through this. And so the amount of work done between Dr. Kenworthy and then Dr. Mansiri and all the leadership and staff and faculty under them at the high school and the superintendent and his team to keep improving this is really nice and appreciated to see. And it's nice to see things like the concurrent enrollments and all those kind of tagged along. I think that's going to be very helpful to parents. Mm-hmm. And I think the continued push for personalization that the high school and the district is leading is really commendable. I will add the thing on URI. It's nice to see URI outreaching more. I've been a little critical of feeling that URI could do a lot more working with state high schools and specifically with a high school that's right in their backyard. So it's nice to see that we are getting some more partnerships and relationships with URI in that. Related to the math point, I know the program of study speaks about suggested CCAs, but I would assume that if someone front loads the 4th math or whatever earlier, that the CCA would follow. That
correct.
They wouldn't have to wait till the senior year to take their CCA in that.
Correct. That the CCAs are embedded in the course, okay. So they would be completing those when they were taking the course. The
only other major concern I had, and I'm sorry this was late getting this out and speaking with Dr. Rhode, I was just concerned on the language, I think it's on page 13 or so, about co-curricular eligibility, athletic and co-curricular eligibility, that I would think the language, because we allow homeschool students to participate in co-curriculars and to potentially charter school, high school students who don't have a high school program but are NK residents to petition to participate in NK co-curricular activities, that we have a little more generic language, essentially about being, in good standing and good conduct and on track in terms of academic progression to graduation, as opposed to saying specifically 7 courses. And then let, obviously, the superintendent and the high school leadership team sort of figure out what all that means. It just seems to me a little restrictive to say 7 courses for potentially a senior in their second semester.
Right. And the point is well taken. And this is the first time we've put this in the program of studies. This was actually an existing policy that we worked on with Mr. Haig. And our policy used to say that you could fail so many courses before you were benched. And it really is tied to the interscholastic league. We changed our language to be more consistent with them as far as their rules about who can play and who can't play. Their rules actually go by a percentage of. Mr. Haig is here, so he can help me out with this. But when we spoke to them, they had a percentage of classes that you have to be passing, and it wasn't about failure. But what we were really trying to address was the inequity with students who had a large number of incompletes on their transcript because they hadn't finished their coursework or they had a lot of missing coursework, and we'd given them extensions on that. And they were actually becoming more eligible than students who had done the coursework and not done as well as they had hoped. So and we wanted to be upfront about the impacts of this, but it does bring the question and the flexibility rules of the Rhode Island Department of Education now, that if a student can complete a lot of coursework before their senior year and the number of credits they have to take and the personalization that they want us to have, it does mean, I think we do have to look at that language. And of course, for homeschool students, and there are going to be students with special circumstances that have to be reviewed. It does seem
I would
a little
sort of
restrictive
recommend
with
if
the
we
7.
can make that language a little more generic and just let the district leadership plug in, on a case-by-case basis how that applies, and to mean they're in good standing, as opposed to sort of having this kind of set number.
Mr. Haig, is there anything you wanted to add about the eligibility to play? Okay.
Because just the scholastically wouldn't control our co-curricular, non-athletic stuff.
Right.
So, again, we're sort of also saying that in the same breath for students in the band or in the play. And again, I still think the same way of that, we should be having some standards, but, maybe having a little more flexibility that goes along with our personalization.
Okay. Point well taken. Thank you. Any other questions?
On my notes. I think I appreciate the discussions you've all had on the grade point average and the class rank, and I always thought there was a little inequity in terms of challenging students maybe to take some classes outside the high school, yet those classes don't count towards their grade point average, and I understand the variability makes that difficult, but as we expand those, I'm just wondering, though, because I maybe understands URI positions, but for other schools, it's not so much the specific class rank, but U.S. News still counts schools in terms of top 10%, top 25%. So is there a thought that while it may be not tracked per se that you're, X, that potentially a student could ask and it be determined that they're in the top 10% or top 25%? Because I would still assume you could in theory rank students if you choose based on the new grading. I think that might be a nice option for some students, just to say, could you give me a band of where I am? Because most schools generally still prefer if they know they're in the top 10% or 25% until U.S. News stops counting that as well for universities.
Mrs. Conti, do you want to speak to that?
I'm actually Toro now. So I participated in the meeting over at URI a few weeks ago, and we talked with admissions reps there and kind of got their point of view from rank, and they really felt like we should completely do away with rank because for the middle student, if we actually did deciles, it hurts the middle student to have it. But like you said, we have a rank, and we can always have it, just not publish it. So if a college asked us where they fell, they said, we could report that out, but not to do it for all students and report it out.
I think that makes sense, but, URI doesn't necessarily speak for the world of private universities, who very much are interested in not necessarily the specific rank, but the band of where the students fall in. So I think that would be a nice option that a student would know, or a private college might want to say, we would just like to know the band the student fell in. So I appreciate it, and I think it's the right direction to eliminate it, but I think if we can retain that flexibility, that would be great.
Right, and I think that would be the decision, whether to do it for all students or just to have the option if the schools are requesting it, and whether to do one or the other.
Yep, thank you.
So beginning with the class that you will no longer be ranking, does that mean that graduating class will not have a valedictorian?
Correct.
Wow.
So that was going to be part of my question. So I just want to make sure that we have the flexibility so that, and to be certain that removing ranks from transcripts and things like that are not going to prejudice any of our students with respect to more competitive colleges or things like that. I mean, not that the University of Rhode Island isn't competitive, but there's a difference between applying to the University of Rhode Island and an Ivy League school, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, or something of that nature. So I'd want to be sure that, A, we have a procedure in place so that we can provide what's necessary for a child, a student applying to one of those schools, but I want to be sure that we would know, like my concern would be, what if the application doesn't list the rank and that is making that kid less competitive to a school and they don't even realize it? And I don't know if we have a way to know that.
We will have a way. We'll be able to see how students are ranked. I mean, we have that ability to see it. It just won't be published information.
No, but like my concern would be someone's applying for an Ivy League school, their application requests what's your class rank, they're unable to provide it because we don't rank them, and that kid falls a little bit lower in the admission scale without even knowing it because that wasn't one of the criteria we could provide.
Right. Yeah.
Hi. Denise Mansieri, principal of the high school. I just wanted to make sure that you realize we are still having our valedictorian and salutatorian. And then what we decided as a committee when we got together was that we would take the top 10% of the students and invite them if they wanted to be the speaker. At graduation, I don't know how many people here have been to graduation before, but we always have a speaker. And sometimes what we thought about is that the valedictorian or the salutatorian sometimes don't want to give a speech. So anybody that's in that band of the top 10 has the opportunity to go ahead and write the speech and to present that, and depending on their oration skills. And what we decide is that will be the person that will give the speech at the graduation.
So it would be a selected speaker, but we would not have a valedictorian.
No, you have a valedictorian and you have a salutatorian. Those two things stay.
Okay.
Okay.
And they're selected out of the top 10 group? Or
no, they are literally the valedictorian and the salutatorian.
So that stays the same.
Yes, that does not go. Yes, it'll be a
surprise.
Right.
Any other questions?
They
usually know.
Yeah. Yes. And to speak to what you were just saying, one of the articles when we were looking at publications to research this, University of Pennsylvania actually said that they reported that a student was hurt in the admissions process due to the ranking because sometimes the ranking that divides number 1 from number 20, the difference is so minuscule. And as you know, in the previous years, we had to go out several decimal places to determine the rankings. So, on paper, the rank from 1 to 25 may look a large gap, when in actuality, it's not. So they actually cited a case where a student was not accepted because of their rank, when they would have been accepted if it was just based on their GPA.
Thank you very much.
Just in closing, I would be really remiss if I didn't mention Mrs. Leach, my secretary, who did a lion's share of the work. This literally was built from scratch because we went from the small booklet that was done in Publisher to a whole new Word document. She recreated the entire document and did the formatting. And, you know, I just can't commend her enough for the work she did on this, and she did a fabulous job, in my opinion.
Thank you.
I might have to duck out anyways.
So thank you all very much for those three presentations. Next, we have citizens' comments, and no. Okay, no one signed up for citizens' comments. If anyone wants to jump in, you can. Yep. No, that's okay. As always, I'd ask if you could please limit your comments to 3 minutes, and at the beginning, please state your name and address.
Chris Madoyan, 70 Spring Road. Just here to speak on behalf, or not on behalf, but in regards to what Mr. Haig presented. I'm the president of the North Kingstown Booster Club here at the high school, and we do a lot of work with the athletic department, as most of you know. And attending these meetings over the last, I guess, 4 or 5 years, or as long as my kids have been going to the high school, have found that you as a committee have taken a lot of these things seriously and value the resources and the improvement to the facilities. And I think what Mr. Haig presented was something that is important to this school system, this school, and the town. I think we've all seen the work that you folks have done on your CTE programs. I hear about the people coming on tours. I know you've done an open house. Mr. Haig refers to the athletic department as the front porch, and I can totally support that. So on behalf of the Booster Club, we're here just to work with you, the town. We raise a fair amount of money, unfortunately not enough to pay for the whole project, but we're willing to offer our services, our manpower, to assist in going after that private funding part, as Dr. Auger and Mr. Haig have spoken part. So look forward to working with you in the near future to hopefully pull this together and make it happen for the athletic turf field, the track, and the tennis court. So thank you.
Thank you. Next, with respect to presentations and recognitions.
I have, excuse me, just 2 recognitions that pertain to our music department. And this is that Tony Silvera, who is one of our staff members here at the high school, was recognized by the School Band and Orchestra magazine as being one of the 50 directors who make a difference. And this selection has only one representation from each state in the United States, and she was selected for the state of Rhode Island. So that's an outstanding recognition, very prestigious. And then the other thing is that the North Kingstown Band had 25 students who made All-State, with 7 ranking as number 1 in the state.
Excellent. Next, we have routine items. So I would ask for a motion to seal the executive session minutes of January 10th, 2017.
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? I have a second. Oh, I'm sorry, I went too far. We have another person for citizens comment. Let's back up for a second.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I missed some sort of protocol on how to sign up to.
That's okay. We do have a sign-up sheet, but that's also fine if you missed it. If you could just please state your name and your address and go right ahead. Sorry.
Yes, Jameson Chase, 25 Wampanoag Circle. And primarily I came here tonight because I was really interested in the presentation on the athletic fields. And as a supporter of all of our athletic teams and having been here in the town for 12 years, I could see where we really need to move forward on that. But I was most struck tonight by the third presentation on the program of studies. And just by way of point, I teach at Salve Regina University in the biology department. And when I heard the comment or the statement about the mathematics being brought down to from 4 to 3 courses, I'm really alarmed by that. I think that, 12 years ago when I moved here for the position at Salve Regina, we chose North Kingstown because of the schools. We looked all over the state. We could have gone anywhere. We came here because of the schools. And we're very happy with that choice, but I'm concerned that we're taking a step backwards in rigor and preparing our students for the best opportunities they have with going from 4 math courses to 3. So I just urge you to...
If I can jump in,
Yeah,
I just want to make a point. We did not reduce the number of required. The state of Rhode Island advises high schools, and we've always been in compliance with that. We have a requirement of 4 maths. A student can achieve one of those by having a math-intensive course, like physics or chemistry, where you're applying a lot of math. That, correct me if I'm wrong, that has not changed from previous years, and that's consistent with just about every public high school in Rhode Island.
Okay. Not to take much of your time, but there are many colleges that are going to be looking at 4 math courses when students are applying to college. And I don't know if they're going to count physics as being one of those math courses. And while the state may have different standards, I hope our school will have a higher standard.
Well, in a number of cases, for instance, in foreign language, students understand that when they're applying to colleges, they know from their freshman year on that if that's where they're thinking, that even though it's not a requirement for the state of Rhode Island, for instance, to have foreign language, to a certain extent, we would advise students to take 3 of those, for instance. So the same kind of thing for math. If you're serious about college, period, particularly in the sciences or math, you're going to want to take 4, true maths all the way through, probably even more than that, and a lot of students do.
Right. So, thank you. And I hope that all of our students are being advised for that so that they have those options to them.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Thank you. So I don't leave anyone else out. I'm sorry, was there anybody else who wanted to speak? Okay, thank you. Yeah, thanks. Okay, so we had a motion and a second to...
Mr. Blasbach, can you repeat who made that motion,
the
please?
motion was by Mrs. McGovern, and the second was by Ms. Hoskins.
Thank you.
Thank you. Unless there's any discussion, all those in favor of sealing the executive session minutes of January 10th, 2017? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Mr. Jones abstaining. Next, I would ask for a motion, Madam Clerk, I can disclose that we did not take any votes at our executive session of January 10th, 2017. Next, we've reached our consent agenda. Do any members have any items they would like to exempt? Ms. McGovern?
C1, C2, and D2.
Any others? Okay. If I could have a motion to approve the consent agenda with the exception of the exempted items C1, C2, and D2.
So moved.
Second. I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Mrs. McGovern, C1?
I was not in attendance and cannot vote.
Okay. So I'd like to ask for a motion to approve the executive session minutes of December 5th, 2016. Second. I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Abstain.
Any opposed? And Ms. McGovern will abstain. I assume C2, same thing? Okay, so a motion to approve item C2, the biennial meeting minutes of December 5th.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Abstain.
And an abstention from Ms. McGovern. Next item was D2, which was the approval of a potential scoreboard for North Kingstown High School. Ms. McGovern.
So I'm asking that this item be tabled and that Mrs. King will do a little bit more research into the possibility of still pursuing the arrangement that we had discussed last year, with an eye towards reducing our capital outlay, if there's any way that we can make it work.
And for the other members, there was a meeting, I don't remember exactly when it was. Do you
The
know?
last meeting in June.
The last meeting in June last year, if you want to go back and review, we had a similar item come up for us, which we tabled at that time to look at other options. So it might be helpful to look at the discussion that we had then, and Mrs. King's going to get back to us and we'll revisit this item. So if I could have a motion to table item D2.
So moved.
Second. A motion and a second. All those in favor of tabling this item? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. We've reached the end of the consent agenda. The next item is what's going to be our topic of discussion for a little while going forward. Our fiscal year 18 superintendent's preliminary budget, which has been sent to us all in our packet. So Dr. Auger and Mrs. King, I'm sure you have a bit to say.
Yes, we do. Thank you very much. I made kind of a lengthy presentation, as a matter of fact, to the Town Council and School Committee a few weeks ago, so you've already heard a lot from me, but I do want to make a few summary points in going forward. Just to be clear for everybody, the budget that I am proposing to the school committee is for an increase in town funding of 4%. And in dollars and cents, that is an increase of $1,939,000 on our budget. To put that in perspective, our budget overall is about $64 million, and our budget currently from what we get from North Kingstown taxpayers is $48,484. So we would be looking for that piece of it, the part that comes from local tax money, to be increased by that 1.939 number. Again, to put that in perspective, there are a number of drivers for that number that really are not within our control per se, right now, because those are items that have been set by contract negotiations over the years and different existing conditions. And I'll just outline four major items. The first would be salaries. That accounts for almost 1.1 million of that 1.9 number. The next item is health and medical benefits. That accounts for about $345,000 out of that 1.9 number. Pension is about $164,000 in increases, and FICA is another $134,000 in increases. Taken together, those items come to $1.74 million. And so we have not touched anything. We haven't added one staff member yet. We haven't changed one program. We're essentially doing to do next year what we're doing right now with all the same resources would be a $1.74 million increase. And then there are a few other items probably filling in another couple $100,000, but they're lesser in degree. So you see the point. So the remaining $200,000, the major adds that we're looking to make are as follows. There are a few staff members.
We are in need of a preschool assistant principal. We have currently making things work with Dr. Pizzullo covering that. That is not the best fit in that. That's not what her role is designed to be. We need someone to be focused on the preschool. This is a job that oversees the work of 20 staff members, including teachers, occupational therapists, certified occupational therapists, assistant physical therapists, 2 speech therapists, 10 teaching assistants, and includes about 300 IEP meetings a year for preschool students. It is a major job and it requires supervision. It needs to be an administrative role. So it's an area that we've needed to go in for some time, and it's my hope that this is the year we will actually do that. We are also looking, because of feedback we've gotten from Rhode, they are telling us that we should not be including our Assistant Special Education Director's salary as a grant-funded item. So we would need to move that to operational funds. And the way, when we can get into this more deeply in future meetings, but in looking at enrollment right now, our best guess is that in all likelihood we will need 2 elementary teachers to cover for increasing enrollments at that level. The enrollment is kind of flat at the middle level and increasing slightly at the high school level for next year. That's what we are projecting. That doesn't always come out that way. As a matter of fact, last year we predicted that enrollment district-wide would go down, and we went up significantly. So a lot of it just happens to be who's moving in and who's moving out of town, and sometimes we're a little bit surprised by that, even though we have a lot of good evidence from past years to help us make educated guesses. It's not an exact science by any means. So, you know, over the years, and I've mentioned this in my last report, there have been year after year where the district did not receive really significant increases at all. On the average, less than 2% a year for the last 5 years. And what that has done, because costs have gone up by more than that, has meant that we have been creeping more and more backwards into conditions where we would need in the neighborhood of 4%. I say 4% because by law the school committee cannot recommend more than 4% to a town council. So we would need to go more toward the maximum end of that number, to 4%, and that over several years in a row at this point, to kind of catch up, to be at a place where we can start to address some significant things that I know members of the school committee care about, and I know members of the community care about. Namely, we desperately need more special education staff, more social work staff, guidance staff, psychologist staffing. I showed a graph at our last meeting that shows us, in comparison to other districts, definitely on the low end there. And I could bring a parade of professionals in front of you all to talk about all the different reasons why, not the least of which is the mental health of our students, about how important it is that we increase that staff. Transportation is a big item. Because of year after year of budget cuts and year after year of the school committee saying, well, the only place we can find a little extra money is if we do with one less bus. We've gone from 27 buses in our fleet in 2004 to 20 buses right now. And that means that we have to make a bus do 4 runs in the morning and 4 runs in the afternoon. And because we are relatively large geographically as a town, that takes time, and it means that schools like Stony Lane and Hamilton and Forest Park have very late start times for their and end times for elementary kids, and our high school has the honor of being the earliest start time in the state, and our elementaries are the latest end time. So we're stretched out as far as any district in the state, and I know a number of you have expressed that you would like to see that improve, and so would I, and so would most of the community based on previous surveys. We have talked in years past in our 5-year strategic plan for technology to year after year kind of include another $100,000 or so in operational money to get to a point where we are covering what we anticipate would be about a $350,000 expense yearly to renew all the one-to-one technology that we have with the leasing program. And we have made those purchases, but primarily we've done that with fund balance money. And this budget that I'm proposing has nothing to kind of wean us back to operational money, and that was part of our plan that we are not living up to. You know, in doing our budget meetings, particularly here at the high school, we have one department head after another comes forward with very legitimate needs. I can tell you that we could seriously use about $35,000 in equipment for robotics, another $70,000 for science equipment, $20,000 for math equipment, $18,000 for ELA resources, and about $40,000 for the music program. None of that is being addressed in this budget. We could use more help with career and tech marketing. Just an article in the paper last week about Narragansett putting some money toward marketing for their career and tech program. You're seeing that more and more as more schools are adopting career and tech programs. The need is to get on out there and see what you can do about attracting students from other districts. That will, in turn, you know, one tuition can pay for a heck of a lot of marketing to, you know, attract a number of kids into your district to bring in more tuition money, which helps the bottom line with the resources that we have coming in and helping us make budget. We have talked extensively over the years about the need for a contingency fund. I know the town has mentioned that they have a contingency fund, and that is money that helps us with unexpected expenses. In the last few years, Mrs. King, if you could help me with this, I'm pretty sure that every year we have been on average about $500,000 that we've had to pull from other places after budgets have already been tight, and where we've had to do so to accommodate unexpected special education expenses that, you know, if someone moves into the district and they have significant special needs, it's not for us to say yes or no. It is yes, and we have to do so in appropriate ways, and that often costs a lot of money. We talked about adding a learning management system. Mr. Waterman and other people in the district are working to figure out what is the best product for that, to help our that will help with you know, teaching and learning and communication between teachers and parents and students. But a product like that costs money, and we expect that that could be in the neighborhood of $20,000. That is not in this budget. Just desks, chairs, tables, cubbies, lockers. If you look at the lockers in the locker room at Davisville Middle School, for instance, they have been there forever, and they look like they've been there forever. Once again, they will not be addressed. And, you know, just, you know, in certain places around the district, we have relatively new furniture and things look good, and in other places you can tell some classrooms haven't been touched for, it seems, decades. And then we had parents come to us recently about a product called DreamBox. It's a technology application that helps students at home and in various schools, including Stony Lane and others. People found that to be a great product. They wanted to pursue that. We have some money toward that for remedial services. The community would like that more district-wide and to have resources for other products like that district-wide. That is not in this budget. So, you know, just these items that I just laid out here, I mean, could account for another, I don't know, another $300,000 to $500,000 to address a lot of these things appropriately, and we don't even have room to I'd like to propose it, but by law I can't. So, I think that is the challenge for the school committee and the town council to figure out a way to get us to a point where we have some long-term sustainability and the ability to address some of these very legitimate needs. This isn't, these aren't extras that would be nice to have. These are things that we need to have, and they're not being included yet because the other items are more of a priority right now. So I look forward to having discussions with all of you about, what we can do to make the budget happen, over the next few weeks. Mrs. King, I don't know if you have something to add here?
I do. So just for our new members and for our continuing members, you'll see that there's a lot of data in here, and we are required by Rhode Island general laws and RIDE regulations for certain items that are in here. So the data by location, by school, all that information, we're required to present that to you. I also want to update you on the timeline for this. So over the next several school committee meetings, we'll be discussing the budget. I can certainly be reached by phone, by email, by meeting. Dr. Auger can be reached. The timeline we are due to, although I have been unable to get a budget calendar from the town, my estimates based on the charter say that our budget is due to the town manager by the close of business on February 27th. Staying within our normal timeline, that would mean that on February 21st, the school committee will be voting on an actual number that we are presenting to the town council as what we are requesting for property tax funding. I do need a little bit of time to try to put together the entire package. What I've done in the past with the town manager is once the school committee has voted on the number, I have presented that number to them and then forwarded the final package to the town council before that deadline on the 27th. Then in March, Dr. Auger and I are called forward to a department meeting. It's usually the town council meets usually during the day. I'm not sure what their format's going to be. And we have a time frame that we're given. We go and meet with the town council members and they ask questions. It's a public meeting. Sometime in April, there'll be a public hearing. And then in early May, there's a town council vote telling us what our number is. Much of our budget is based on uniform chart of accounts. You know those are RIDE regulations and state laws. And then the budget just goes through several sections. There's an executive summary. There's a summary of information by school, by location. There's a source of funds section. There are budget assumptions, which have our sources and major expenses. There's a personnel breakdown by FTE count, by category. The CIP is a big section. You've seen that. That's what we've presented to the Town Council and Asset Management Committee, but it's again presented in this budget for the town to have when we present the budget to them. There's a fund balance schedule, and there are some supplemental schedules. And what I think is probably a good starting point for everybody is really the last section, and that's the line items by object, in which I show from FY14 and 15 and 16 actuals, FY17 projection, and our FY18 preliminary budget.
Okay, thank you very much. For the new members, Mrs. King, I was going to ask you to do what you just did, so thank you for doing it before I even needed to ask. That's the timeline that we work with. And as Dr. Auger and Mrs. King said, particularly being new, as you know, that is a very, very, very big packet that you guys received. They are very helpful and available. I really suggest, I've already had conversations, and I think many of us have. You've got to meet with them, talk to them, get answers to questions, because we have a lot of things to work on before we're able to come up with our final number on the 21st. So, and that's really an inflexible deadline. We have to have our absolute number on that date, on that meeting. So any questions tonight for them at our very first round through? Not yet? Okay. And away we go. So, that continuing over the next couple weeks, our next item is something in the plus category. So we have a request for an approval of a ride mini grant. Mrs. King, could you just briefly speak to that?
Dr. Humbert will
great.
address it.
I'm happy to say that we were awarded a $7,000 mini grant from Rhode, and this is a leadership grant. It's to help professional development with our administrative team. So it will be all of the building administrators as well as Dr. Carson and Dr. Pizzullo and Mr. Waterman, et cetera. So this is going to be for to support blended learning and to help our building administrators learn coaching techniques so that we can go deeper with our blended learning in the classrooms. And so we have 4 sessions that will occur during our admin council meetings. They are entitled Blended Learning Basics, and the second one is Coaching Strategies in a Blended Model, then Strategic Scaling and Sustainability, and then Data Outcomes and Showcasing Lighthouse Classrooms.
Thank you. We do need to approve accepting that grant, so I would ask for a motion to approve the acceptance of the RIDE mini grant. I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? I'd just like to say thank you for applying for the grant and congratulations on receiving it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Next, we come to unfinished business. Anything with respect to the 2016-2017 school budget?
No, I don't have anything. I will continue to put that on the agenda going forward because your next year's budget really is impacted by this year's budget as well. So that'll continue to be an agenda item.
Next item is a policy change for the new members. So you know, when we're adding a new policy, we generally require that we do 2 reads and approve it twice. For an amendment to an existing policy, our practice has been that we can approve it after only 1 read. This was one that I requested in preparing for our annual organizational meeting. I was reading through what our procedure is for that and realized that there's a section there that is out of date with respect to some changes to Rhode Island law. Our policy predates these changes and stated that the primary attorney for the school department was the town solicitor, and there were some Rhode Island court cases and amendments to Rhode Island general laws that specifically authorized a school committee and school department to obtain independent legal counsel separate and apart from the solicitor. So this change makes it clear that we have the right to hire an attorney to represent the school committee that is independent from the town solicitor. And I will tell you, if you go back a few years, there were times when we were actually in litigation against the town, and having the solicitor as our attorney certainly wouldn't have made sense. So this policy just reflects that change. Mr. Jones, I know you had some other suggestions to the policy that you'd sent as well. What I'd like to do is if we could make this change now, and you can forward those to the policy subcommittee to take a look at, and then it was mostly wording, grammatical things above and beyond that. But that's the reason for what we have in front of us right now, is to make that change regarding our council.
Yeah, I think the only substantive change was in talking about mandatory organizational items was adding the CLAC and health and wellness, since those are mandatory, mandated by the state changes. And yes, the rest were simply grammatical and maybe a philosophical point of trying to shorten our policy language to the extent we can.
What I'd like to do is approve this change for now, and then if we can work on the other bit, and we'll come back to the other items.
Absolutely.
Yep.
I have a question.
Yes.
Is the town charter still in conflict with the state law with regards to this clause?
I'll let our legal counsel answer officially, but
I don't believe so. When I first came on as school committee attorney, it was actually through the town council that my firm got appointed. I do know that then like within the year, the law changed, the statute changed. But I haven't reviewed the charter. I will.
Well, I can tell you, I mean, I'm not our attorney, I'm just an attorney, I'm not
Right, but the
our
statute's
attorney.
gonna overrule,
But the
yes.
statute that's cited here specifically states that it overrules any provision of a town charter that is inconsistent with this. And this statute was passed in response to a Rhode Island State Supreme Court decision. So,
Back around 2000 and, I want to say 2004, it was early, it's in the early 2000s.
So, again, we can let our legal counsel give an official answer, but even if the charter is inconsistent, that statute trumps
Correct.
any inconsistency in the charter.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or discussion? Then I'd ask for a motion to approve the revisions to policy BD.
Motion to approve?
Second. I have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Next is fiscal year 2016 audit. Mrs. King?
Yeah, I just want to update the committee quickly. Although this was not communicated to me, there were a couple of people that were in attendance at the town council, I think it was December 19th meeting, at which the town finance director indicated that he was asking for a 30-day extension on the due date of the FY16 audit. RIGL notes that the audit needs to be completed and presented within 6 months of your fiscal year end. So although that was not communicated to me by the town, I did receive a letter from Mr. Hoyle, the Auditor General, yesterday that approved that extension. So I don't know why we had the extension. The school department is, as far as I understand it, I think there's just some field work that the auditors are doing, and that will have to be completed within a couple of weeks' time. The Auditor General's letter indicated that there would be a conference call the third week in January to make sure that the town was still on track with meeting the end of January deadline.
Okay. And just to be clear, we've sent everything that they need and done everything they've requested.
Right.
Okay.
The extension, I'm not sure the reason for the extension.
Thank you. Next items are just some reports here. Did anyone have any questions regarding the disposal notification or financial reports that were attached to the agenda packets? If not, we have reached the end of the agenda. I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. We stand adjourned. Thank you very much.